account held against the administration that it lied about WMD, my caller may as well reflect on why President Clinton was felt it necessary to bomb Iraq for 4 days in 1998 on precisely the same assumption that Saddam Hussein possessed and was developing weapons of mass destruction.
Augusta, Maine, capital city. Let's go for Bret Stephens. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning. My question is pretty straightforward. It's, to me, receiving confidential information or classified information and reporting it is no different than receiving stolen goods. And there's laws against that. And so without overly censoring the press, shouldn't there be a law preventing receiving of stolen information? And if so, shouldn't reporters be prosecuted if they don't reveal who stole the information and gave it to them?
Bret Stephens.
Well, I'm again reluctant to subscribe fully to what your caller from Maine is proposing, because obviously there is a tension between a genuine public interest to know certain kinds of information which can very easily be stamped classified by one government agency or another for reasons which are fair or foul, and a genuine interest, the genuine interests of national security, which involve the lives and safety of Americans and of people everywhere. Now, for a long time, I think there was a kind of understanding between the press and the government about the limits that each might plausibly observe, and that's one of the issues that we take up in this very editorial of this morning, about what sort of limits the press might choose to observe. When Bill Keller, the editor of the New York Times, mentioned those limits, he talks about sort of traditional things like disclosing troop movements. But when you're fighting an asymmetric war against terror, I think there's a very good argument that disclosure of secrets regarding our monitoring of their financial transactions is akin to disclosing troop movements and providing aid to the enemy. You know, there's a very instructive case here. I think maybe instructive for your caller from Maine. You know, in the 1940s, during the Second World War, Robert McCormick's Chicago Tribune was very against FDR and strenuously critical of his prosecution of the war. And the Tribune, if I'm not mistaken, got hold of information that we, the United States, had broken the Japanese code. Obviously, that was a kind of critical step forward for the Allied war effort back then. And the administration of Roosevelt gave some serious thought to prosecuting Mr. McCormick and the Tribune under the Espionage Act of 1917. And they ultimately decided against it, both because they felt that it would just such a prosecution would simply amplify the fact that the United States had in fact broken the Japanese code, and I think also because it had a sort of common sense. It took a common sense approach to the interests of a free press in a time of war. Now, obviously, I'd like the administration to take that same common sense approach. I think it was very unfortunate that Judy Miller was imprisoned for 85 days. But at the same time, it seems to me that that effort gets no help from the New York Times when it is sort of aggressively breaking stories and disclosing stories that do seem to be genuine national security issues and don't seem in any serious way to have broken any kind of law. In fact, the New York Times editorialized in favor of just such a program shortly after September 11.
Bret Stephens is in New York. He's a Wall Street Journal foreign affairs columnist and on their editorial board. We're going to listen, might want to make notes listen to a couple of calls here so that we can hear the voices out there and what they're interested in this morning. Vienna, Virginia, you're next. Vienna, Virginia, are you there? Vienna, Virginia, one more time. Not there. Let's go to Yuma, Arizona. Yuma, Arizona, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. Mr. Stephens, My question goes to the fact that with the First Amendment rights of the press, you guys have an awesome responsibility. But with that responsibility also comes, you need to temper the fact that we do have secrets that need to be kept because people can get hurt with this. And I don't think the New York Times takes that responsibility very seriously. I'm an active duty Marine, 22 years, and it really upsets me when I see the NSA story come out. This story, especially since the New York Times editorialized in 2001 about doing this exact thing, and then they come out and say, well, everybody knew that the government was doing this. Yes, we did know this, but we did not know how the government was doing it. And that's the thing that the New York Times did. And
All right, so thanks. Let's go to Toms River, New Jersey. What do you have to say this morning?
Yes, good morning. Just don't cut me off right away, please. It seems that the main gripe is that against the Times is that, according to you, sir, from the Journal there, is that we're at war, and during times of war, whether it be asymmetrical, like you say, an asymmetrical war, because it's a different type of war, the Times should not have released this information. But could you explain to me, sir, there's Muslims in just about every country of the world. Some nations are Islamic-based nations, and the majority of the people are Muslims. But there are Muslims in every corner of the earth. Could you explain to me, sir, who exactly is America warring against at this time?
Let's go one more, and then we'll come to you, Bret Stephens. This time we go to, I think it's Roanoke, Virginia.
Oh, hello. I'm two questions to ask the editor. And the first one, the gentleman from Ohio had asked about the lack of coverage of the brutal murders of the two PFCs. And there was just one tiny article in the Roanoke Times about it inside the paper. On the headlines, they played up what's happening in the Supreme Court about Guantanamo Bay. I'd like to know what he thinks the reason the PFCs haven't been given coverage. That was a horrible incident.
All right, thanks. I thought she was finished. You can see where everybody's coming from this morning. Any of those, just grab those thoughts and comment on them.
Well, let me, I guess, take them in reverse order. About Private Menchaca and his comrade, we editorialized about it. We had a lead editorial about exactly their deaths and what it signifies, both as a tribute to those soldiers and to give some thought, some real consideration to the kind of enemy that the United States and its allies face with the jihadi insurgents. These are people who fall well outside of any civilized norm. I think we've witnessed for a long time. Maybe they're comparable to the people who perpetrated the massacres in Rwanda, but certainly at their level. And they give, I would say, they give the Nazis a run for their money in terms of sheer barbarity. But I don't know. The lady from Roanoke mentioned the coverage in her paper, but as I said, we covered it extensively, and I believe that it was also covered fairly extensively in a lot of the big newspapers, all the way from the initial their kidnapping, their gruesome murders, and then their return home. Your second caller, I think from New Jersey, asked who is it we're warring against, and I think that in a sense my first answer, my first response provides the answer. We're warring against a brand of militant Islamic fundamentalists who are engaged in various arenas in acts of terror against the United States and against other countries. I don't know how many times people like Tony Blair or George Bush have to say we are not at war with Muslims for the message to get through that this is not has never been conceived or waged as a war against Muslims. Quite the contrary, I would say that it is a war being waged on behalf of Muslims, that is to say on behalf of Muslims who want to live in free and relatively moderate societies in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, and elsewhere in the Middle East. But it seems amazing to me that even now people seem to think that the message is that this is a war against Islam generally, or against Muslims as a people. Finally, your first caller, I think, raised the issue of First Amendment responsibilities, and I couldn't agree more with what he suggested. The First Amendment is not an absolute. It's not a license for absolute liberty. It does confer very serious responsibilities to those of us who are members of the press, and it is a shame, in my view, that some members of the of my profession seem to think that it gives them not only an opportunity but an absolute right and duty to disclose any kind of information that comes their way, even if it puts programs or personnel in harm's way. And that's why I think the Journal today very much rued the publication, the leaking and the publication of the financial surveillance program.
Bret Stephens is in New York this morning. He's with the Wall Street Journal. He'll be with us to the top of the hour. We're going to listen to a couple more calls again and see what is on your mind. Let's go to Macon, Georgia. George Bush supporter. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for taking my call. A quick comment for Bret. Several years ago in the early 80s, I was part of a peacekeeping force after the Camp David Accords and read the Jerusalem Post. It's one of the few editorial cartoons I ever cut out. It was around Thanksgiving. It was two turkeys talking to each other, and one told the other one that today was the day the world over, turkeys gave thanks they didn't live in America. I thought that was pretty humorous. The second is about the whole comment and commentary you've had going on this morning about the media and its role in our society. In a free and open society, we are the amazement of totalitarian regimes the world over that we allow dissenting opinions, that we do things that seem to harm ourselves, and that is our true fundamental strength. The fact that we allow these kind of dissenting opinions. To me, the Times, even though I'm a very staunch conservative, did give them appropriate time to remove the man from harm's way before they broke the story. And while I disagree with what the media does from time to time in leaking information, I think that's what makes our democracy strong, is the fact that we do have the information.
Thanks, caller. Prospect, Kentucky, a Democrat. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, and thank you. I just would like to say that MSNBC last week showed Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney at length discussing how they were tracing the terrorist bank accounts. So this was no secret. I think Mr. Bush has broken the law so much that if we didn't have people like the New York Times, we would be in big, big trouble. Also, I wanted to say I don't think the public's aware that if this goes to Congress, the Supreme Court decision, these men will be tried by people appointed by Mr. Bush with no representation. They will not be allowed to see the charges brought against them. So, in essence, they're going to do exactly what we're doing now, hold these people in solitary confinement. And for Mr. Bush to have the liberty to appoint a military tribunal is totally against our Constitution and our...
Bret Stephens, one more call. We'll come back to you. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you're on the air.
Hi. I was just, I took offense to him saying that, about Bush being, people calling Bush a liar and being dishonest, that it's not strictly a partisan issue. Last night I saw on C-SPAN 2 Republicans talking about how they felt misled, Ron Paul from Texas and Walter Jones from North Carolina. He had said earlier something about spin is not the same as, lying. And I think anything other than what exactly happened is not the truth. So I do not think politicians spinning information is giving us the real truth.
Mr. Stephens, a lot on the plate there.
Okay, well, to your first caller who picked up the cartoon that must have come out in the 1970s, I have a good sense of exactly who drew that cartoon. It's a man by the name of Mike Ronen. He's 79 years old. He's still a cartoonist at the Jerusalem Post. He's a very dear friend of mine.